Welcome to Queen City Cyber Consulting's channel. Please like, subscribe, and share.
Welcome back to Queen City Cyber Consulting. For the video today, as I'm creating these, it's kind of a throw all of the topics in a hat and draw them out and pick one that suits. There may come a time when this kind of information can actually be identified, categorized, and listed. But right now, out there in the world, so much is changing so fast that it's hard to sometimes keep up with it. Go listen to my previous video today on AI and the breakout that occurred, and you'll understand what's happening. Now, in the regular cybersecurity world, there's a host of things we could talk about, and that's kind of what I'm piecemealing my way through in these videos. So I hope that you stick with me and you watch the videos, and at some point in time we may lay them all out into some kind of coordinated effort. But given the recent attacks on healthcare organizations and third-party healthcare companies that have been breached and ransomwared or lost data, I wanted to hit on ransomware for a video. Mostly because it's still a day-to-day occurrence. Ransomware has not gone away. I dealt with it as a incident response analyst, incident response coordinator, a couple times a month, here and there. So what I wanted to look at today was the NIST ransomware risk profile. And if we go out to NIST, we'll see they have an entire document on that. Now, a lot of times companies just shoot this from the hip, and that's not really a good way to proceed because they miss things. But NIST has put together a pretty handy-dandy little document for us that we can actually use to assess our current cybersecurity status and also deal with ransomware. Because ransomware is slightly different than malware. It's different than an insider threat. It's a different kind of threat that we face. So ransomware, as they define it, is a type of malicious software or malware that encrypts an organization's data and demands payment as a condition of restoring access to that data. Goes on to say this ransomware can also be used to steal an organization's information and demand additional payment in return for not disclosing the information to authorities, competitors, and the public. This changes over the course of time. There is ransomware. There is other kinds of attacks that are out there where they don't necessarily encrypt your data, and that's kind of a key element for ransomware. What they do is they'll come in, they'll steal some data, and then they'll encrypt the network. And then you'll get an email or a phone call even sometimes saying, we've got your data, we've encrypted your data, you can't get it back, but we have it. If you'll pay the ransom, we'll give it back to you. That's ransomware. And it's so ubiquitous. There's no business vector that is immune from ransomware in today's world. Everything from healthcare to finance to education to governmental agencies to small business, medium size, they've all been hit at one point or another. Because ransomware has evolved over time. That's a topic for an entirely different video. And you'll see some, what I like to call, I guess, purists in the field who like to nitpick other people's content and what they talk about. because it doesn't suit their terminology and their definitions. And I hope that the people that are watching these videos and everything along those lines don't fall into that trap. So with ransomware, we have a challenge. We have to address the operational impacts of ransomware. We have to talk about the extortion mechanisms that are used and also the strategic importance of the CSF 2.0 community profiles that are out there. So let's look at some of the core profile objectives here. We have governance, I'll say instead of governance and strategy. So you have to look at your risk appetite. How much risk are you willing to accept that you may get ransomware? And I'll use an example here of a small one building credit union in my local vicinity that got hit with ransomware. They looked at the risk. They were actually a very forward-looking organization, despite being, I think they at the time they had 15 total employees, but they were conducting employee training on cybersecurity. They were conducting an in-depth monthly vulnerability assessment, and they were working toward instituting a complete and entire cybersecurity strategy. Very forward thinking. And this was a 15-person office. But they knew what they were doing or what they wanted to do. They recognized the risk and they were addressing them. I've seen larger organizations that don't even talk about risk. They just kind of go on their way and think that it'll never happen to me. And that's like when I was growing up and we were going out and picking blackberries on the side of the mountain. One of us always had a shotgun or a 22 rifle because you know what likes blackberries and dwelling in them? Well, they don't like blackberries, but they like the creatures that come and eat the blackberries. Rattlesnakes. And this mountain was full of rattlesnakes. So if one of us wasn't doing overwatch and keeping an eye on the others, it was quite possible one of us would have got bitten by a rattlesnake. And that person's job as overwatch, they had the gun and they were listening for the rattle and they were also looking for signs of movement in the bush and responding when one of us would say, hey, uh, there's a sound here I don't get. And they would come over and they would check. That's what governance and strategy is. You do have some regulatory obligations, and unfortunately, a lot of times companies are unaware of those obligations, and you also have supply chain expectations out there. So, protect and segment, the second one here in our presentation. Do you have zero trust network controls? Yes or no? Leave it at that. Do you have strict access management? I'll leave that at a yes or no. Do you have immutable data backups? I'm going to leave that at a yes or no. And do you have automated patching pipelines to shut down the vulnerabilities that pop up continually that allow ransomware actors to get inside your network? Yes or no? Take it or leave it. Detect and recover. Do you have continuous endpoint and directory monitoring? Yes or no? Can you or do you have the ability to isolate active threats rapidly? Now, in the case of this 15-person credit union that I was just telling you about, the only ability they had at the time to isolate their network was by pulling the network cable from their systems. And they knew that. They didn't have an EDR, they didn't have network segmentation. But what the manager, the CEO of the company did was consult with me and say, what do we need to do? And I said, well, given your current status, the best thing you can do is train your 15 employees is that if they see something off going on their computer, is pull that network cable from their system. And we actually did training on that, on how to pull that cable. And I went through the entire process, everything from showing them what it looked like down to the very them going hands on. Now it's easy to do with 15 people, granted, but they went hands on and pulled that network cable from their system just so they would know what it would feel like, what it would look like, and they did it. Uh, and it saved them in the end. And do they have actual playbooks for restoration? And if they do have them, have they tested them? All these are extremely important for a small business, medium-sized business to consider because too often they're overlooked and ignored. So, what is the six-step operational model? Now, NIST sets this up, and what they basically say is this is the recommended baseline to prevent, isolate, recover from active ransomware events. And this does vary a little bit in the real world because it just that's the way things work in the real world. So step one, plan for the events. Don't sit back, fold your arms, and say this will never happen to us because it will. I'm sorry. I don't want to be the doom gloomer. I don't want to be the black pillar, but I've seen too many companies fall prey to this. They take the viewpoint of, well, it happens to everyone else, but it's not going to happen to us. Well, guess what? It's going to. Eventually, it's going to. So you need to establish ransomware risk strategies that take into account your own organizational mission objectives and your own risk appetite, which of course flows downhill from your executives, your board of directors, down into the trenches, so to speak. It's kind of like the whole army layout. You've got your general, well, you've got your politicians who design this overlaying plan, and then it flows down to the generals whose job it is to define the strategy that fulfills those goals, and then from the generals it flows down to the combat troops who have to fulfill those goals in their day-to-day activities. So what can you do here? Well, number one, define clear decision-making roles and authority. Lay it out in your incident response plan. Number two, enumerate the legal, the regulatory, and your contract duties. Who do you have to contact in the event of a breach? How do you report it, and who do you report it to? That all needs to be put into your incident response plan. And finally, and this isn't final, it's final for the slide, but not in real world, establish an out of band communication plans. Um, if you lose your email, how do you communicate with each other? If your internal voice over IP phones go down because of an attack, which they have done in the past, how do you communicate? Do you use cell phones? Do you use external emails, personal emails? That all needs to be included in your incident response plan. You need to plan for these things. Number two, the human firewall. Educate, educate, educate. All of your employees should have to go through training. Now, most companies do it annually. Some companies do it quarterly. Other companies may do it biannually. But whatever kind of training you use, it needs to be pertinent and applicable to your business. And I need to stress that because I've seen and I've had to take I don't know how I would even describe it, the anonymized, the sense dulling online repetitive cybersecurity training to remain SOC 2 compliant or remain compliant to some other governing authority. And basically, it's a checkbox. And for me, working in incident response, those exercises were always really brain numbing because I already knew I didn't even need to go through the training. I could take the 10 question multiple choice test and pass it without ever going through the training. So, what purpose did it really serve? And I did appreciate that from several of my local clients and customers. They want their training to be very personalized and applied to their own environment. And that's important. And I know the ongoing thing with training, there's multiple companies out there doing this, but let me tell you, It's a whole lot different when you can bring somebody in who does the training in person and interacts with your employees and makes it personal. That changes the dynamic. And no, I'm not trying to sell business here. I'm telling you just the literal truth. You need to conduct phishing and social media simulations. There are a ton of, like, again, online businesses that do phishing simulations. You can even set it up internally to do it. Manage your bring your own device, BYOD, bring your own device risk and your personal device policy. Are your employees able to access your internal network using their own cell phones, their own laptops, their own tablets? All that's risk, which falls back to number one, is establishing your risk appetite. And finally, cultivate what they call a no blame incident reporting culture. And I've seen this go back and forth at Black Hat or DEF CON, sorry, DEF CON, not Black Hat, but at DEF CON, they have the wall of shame. If you are there and your cell phone or your laptop gets hacked, you go up on the wall of shame. And that is a remediatory instant shame that you got hacked. Now, in our current political environment now, it's become more of a no blame thing, and they don't want their employees to feel bad. So they actually reward those who report phishing attempts, those who don't fall for the social engineering attacks, different things like that. I've seen everything from they get their own personal parking space for a month to where they will actually give gift cards out to employees who report the phishing attacks. Take it for what it's worth. You have to do the eliminate exploitation, step number 3, which involves system hardening and zero trust. Your patching has to be an ongoing, continuous process because vulnerabilities are constantly being discovered out in the real world and almost immediately are being taken advantage of by the attackers. So if you're not patching vulnerabilities on your systems, you're leaving a hole there for someone to get into your network. It's like if I'm at my house and I'm walking through my house and I spot a broken window. And I say, you know what? I'll get to that tomorrow. Then tomorrow becomes the next day. And then that becomes next week. And then that becomes a month ago. Well, that open, broken window is a vector of attack. And the longer I let it go, it may not be a human that gets in, but it could be a bird or a rabid raccoon or something that comes through that window. It needs to be fixed. The same thing is true here in the cyber world. Set up zero trust architecture. You have to have segmentation within your network to prevent lateral movement, not only from malware, but from threat actors, because that's one of the things they love to do. Once they get patient zero under their control, they're not going to sit there. They're going to move through the network. And having that micro segmentation set up is a way to prevent that. Set up software allow listing, restrict execution to authorized applications only. And guess what, folks? That applies to AI tools too. You can't allow shadow AI into your environment and not expect to have troubles. Supply chain requirements, again, you have contractual systems set up that enforce vendor security expectations. And I would even put in there at this point third party requirements that you should have for anybody who has access to your environment that's a third party. They should have the same or similar security protocols that you have to protect your environment. In one case that I investigated and worked, we ended up tracking the initial infection vector back to a third party vendor whose email had been breached and was sending in malicious email to the company under the guise of equipment requests. And they looked legit because they were coming from the proper source. They were worded the same exact way. However, the attachments were malicious, and that allowed the secondary party to get breached. And we did manage to confirm that and track it back. So make sure that your third party vendors are covering these as well. Threat detection, you have in today's world, you have to have endpoint protection. You have to have an EDR of one sort or another that has real-time payload scanning in place. You have to be able to monitor your Active Directory, um, your identity access management for suspicious credential behavior, account creation, password changes. All of those things come into play here. DNS and web filtering. Another, you have to be able to block malicious domains. Do you have a threat intelligence program that is monitoring ongoing threat profiles and updating your firewalls, updating your DNS, updating your web filtering systems with the latest and greatest in threat vector activity? If not, you're missing a step. Very important. The shield has cracks in it at that point. Number 5, once an infection does occur, you have to limit the spread. And that's vital, of course. I went through a job interview not too long ago where during the interview process, they continually changed the scenario on me. And one of them was limit the spread. Uh, and they didn't tell me this in the beginning, but the company that was under attack had multiple offices spread throughout the United States. I was focused on one office alone. I had asked earlier if there were other offices, and I was told no. But then they said, oh, well, it turns out they have 3 or 4 other offices. Well, all that changes your dynamic. So limit the spread. And that's the key point here. Can you contain the spread? Number 1, you need to be able to mandate multi-factor authentication for all user accounts. You should already have done that. That should just be a standard here. And we are in the 21st century, folks. That should be a standard. And I couldn't tell you how many times we responded to an incident in my job. And one of the questions that we ask is, do you have two-factor authentication? And we're told no. We it was too time intensive, or employees wouldn't go for it, or whatever. I mean, come up with your excuse. They have them. You need to mandate multi-factor authentication for all user accounts, not just your administrators, but all user accounts. Enforce least privilege across your network. Who needs access to what information? And then limit the access. Lockouts. If a person tries to log in, say 3 to 5 times and fails, then they get locked out until they contact the help desk and request to have their password reset. This is, like I said, the 21st century. These things should be normal day-to-day operational procedures. Unfortunately, a lot of times they're not. Then you have your recovery. You have to ensure business continuity. I can't tell you how important that is to what, for most businesses, is the final line. If you can't recover quickly and fast, then you're going to lose money, and the business can't abide that. And I have seen small businesses close because they couldn't get back online quick enough. So this includes some of the things that you can do is exercise your incident response and your business continuity plans via tabletops. It's a simple thing to do. It's easy. Maybe cost you a lunch. Maintain your isolated air gap backups. Make sure that they are indeed isolated and available when you need them. And also audit your backup integrity prior to any kind of restoration. That's an important part of the entire incident response process, but you have to ensure that it's done. So what are some mappings that we can look at? Well, number 1, you have governance. Your risk appetite, your policies, your backup, immutability are all under governance. Hardening, do you have zero trust? Do you have multi-factor authentication? Do you have automated patching set up and in place right here? That's all important. You have to have that. Detection. Do you have an EDR in your environment? Do you audit your Active Directory? Do you audit your users to ensure that there's nothing suspicious happening or going on? And finally, for restoration, check your backups. Where are they stored? Online, offline? Do you have access to them? When's the last time you checked them via tabletop? I've conducted tabletops where we get to the point where that's one of the test points. And during the tabletop, I actually will make the company contact whoever is their backup provider and ask this question to see if they have access to them and if they can get them back. That's the way you test them. Cheap, inexpensive, and not very time consuming, but it needs to be done. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, you want to talk about any of the points in the video, hey, leave a comment. Love to see some comments. Love to hear what you're thinking. Love to hear some ideas on future videos. This is Queen City Cyber Consulting signing off. Have a great day. Go forth and conquer.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.